Time when rents are at record levels, your government has come up with a new solution to hike them up even further. Your proposal to effectively remove rent controls from new tenancies signals disaster for renters, especially young people, students and their families, and anyone who moves to a new rental home. The reality of your plan was always clear, but now it is not just the opposition saying it. Despite all of the spin and bluster from government and you as well over the last number of weeks, the central bank has said that your rent hike bill will be painful for tenants. In fact, I quote, they said that the social costs and the pain felt by households is not even. This will hurt young people and their ability to save to buy their own home. This will hurt students and their families who are paying already extortionate rents. And this will hurt ordinary working people who find themselves stuck in an ever-spiralling rental trap. Your plan, Taoiseach, is a green light for massive rent increases every year. Your government spent a full week attempting to disguise the fact that your plan shafts renters. Your plan is a green light for massive rent increases every year. You just couldn't be straight with people. So in a blizzard of confusion, we had government ministers tripping over themselves to contradict each other. You declared, Taoiseach, in this House last week that, I quote, we will be taking specific measures to support students. Do not worry at all, because we have their backs. Then Minister Brown confirmed the reality. There will be no exemptions or special protections for students in the private rental sector or any renters who will be faced with massive rent hikes. You keep saying that this is a balanced plan. Nothing could be further from the truth. You can't promise vulture funds that you can increase prices while pretending to renters that rent will not go up. We know who is going to pay and that it is renters. So let's be honest, Taoiseach. Government housing policy has always been about investors and giving vulture and cuckoo funds free rein to squeeze rents out of hard-working people. And to make matters worse, supply is falling off a cliff. You missed your housing targets last year, you were nowhere near close to meeting them this year, and now the central bank has again revised down their estimates for new home completions this year, and barely above 30,000, far below your target of 40,000. But not only will you miss your targets this year, the central bank believes that you will miss them next year, and the year after that, and the year after that. And all of this is happening in a cost of living crisis. Taoiseach. Rents are going up at the same time as groceries, as insurance, broadband, and at a rate far higher than incomes have increased. And this is putting a burden that people simply cannot take. But despite all of this confusion, there is one absolute certainty: that rents will go up and that you will remove one of the few protections that renters have. Rent controls will not apply to new build homes. They will not apply to existing homes after a renter moves out voluntarily. They will not apply to off-campus student accommodation, despite you saying that you have their backs. The average tenancy is just over 3 years long, meaning that very soon almost all renters will be hurt by your decisions this week. It will hurt tens of thousands of people every year. It will lock families into overcrowded accommodation for fear that if they move, their rents will skyrocket. There is absolutely no guarantee that these changes will increase supply. I believe that rents need to be brought down. You and your government obviously believe that rents should go up. And of course, the rent pressure zone should be extended. It should have been done from day one. But scrap all of the rest of your absolutely crazy proposals that will increase the price of rent. So, Taoiseach, when are you going to stop punishing renters? Do you now accept that as a result of your decision this week that rents will go up? And will you take the opportunity to correct the record of the Dáil and accept that students who live off campus will not be protected under your proposals and in fact will be one of the first to be affected?
Well, thanks very much, Laskin Corla, and thank you to Deputy Cullinane for raising these important issues. Firstly, I want to be very clear for people watching in at home that the decisions the government has taken, and indeed the legislation that the government is passing through this House and through the Seanad this week, is legislation that will extend the rent pressure zones. As everybody renting across Ireland knows, the rent pressure zones were due to end at Christmas. They were due to end this year. And had we not taken action, they would have ended, they would have disappeared. So not only have we taken a decision to extend the rent pressure zones based on the advice of the Housing Agency and others, we've also taken the decision to expand the rent pressure zones to parts of the country that weren't covered, and to do that in a speedy fashion. And there's around 11 counties in Ireland that will benefit from that. So rent pressure zones staying in place, going nationwide, is a good and sensible thing to happen in terms of protecting existing tenants as well. Deputy, you quoted the Central Bank report, but of course you just quote parts of the Central Bank report. Central Bank have also said that our rent pressure zone reforms will have a positive effect on supply. They themselves acknowledge that housing projections are subject to uncertainty, but they've said this morning that it's not impossible to reach the targets, but there's a number of steps that need to be taken. Indeed, many of the steps that they've outlined are areas where you've seen government have a priority focus on in recent weeks. The establishment of Commission Planola, the decision to extend planning permissions that could have expired, the decision to make more developments exempted, because about 50% of a planner's time in some local authorities can be taken up on small things like attic conversions or modular developments in the back garden. The new national planning framework that we've brought through this House to ensure that there's enough land zoned to get to the 300,000 plus homes we need to deliver by the end of 2030. And very shortly, next month, you will see a very significant programme of investment from government in the key enabling infrastructure to deliver homes, most particularly water, wastewater, and energy as well. So we are taking steps, and I know exactly what I said in relation to students last week. I said, quote, "We will be taking specific measures to support students. Do not worry, because we have their back, and we do, and we will." You don't need to lecture me in relation to students. When I was Minister for Further and Higher Education, every year we reduced students' fees and we extended the renters' tax credit to students, while you in Northern Ireland continue to expect students to pay way more in terms of accessing colleges. And don't you worry, and more importantly, don't students worry, in the forthcoming budget we'll take more measures to protect students. So please don't try to create this generational anxiety in relation to what we're going to do to support our students at a time when we have more people than ever before in our history accessing third-level education, and we'll continue to support students. But let me also say to the students, or to the renters, or to the people that Sinn Féin tries to mislead, it is your policy to abolish rent pressure zones. In the Sinn Féin housing plan, in the Sinn Féin housing plan, just give David his chance this week, Matt, you might get a go next week. In the Sinn Féin housing plan, you're in favour of reference rents. Reference rents, which the ESRI said would be unworkable and complex, which the Housing Agency said would be unworkable, complex and lead to more disputes. And you do know what a reference rent would have meant. It would have meant actually increasing the rent for existing tenants. So, you know, I don't expect consistency from Sinn Féin in terms of policy development, but a little bit of recognition that you contested a general election on the basis of abolishing rent pressure zones and replacing it with reference rents, something that the Housing Agency, the ESRI, and I reckon a hell of a lot of renters don't think is a good idea either.
Well, I have to say again, your response is all spin and bluster and blame everybody else but your government for the fact that what you are doing here is bringing in policies that will drive up the cost of rent for many people. So I can tell you that students will not by your line of argument. They will see through your spin, because the reality is that many students are going to see their rent and the cost of their accommodation increase. They know it. They know you don't have their back. And you talk about a balance. The balance here is tipped in favour of the vulture funds and the cuckoo funds and the investors. More money for them, more profit for them, which is always the case under Fine Gael, who represent a cosseted privileged class, from my perspective. But see, when it comes to ordinary people who have to pay increased costs on groceries, on insurance and now on rent, they're the ones who are paying the price. So stand up once and for all. Don't be blaming Sinn Féin for something we didn't do. Take responsibility for your actions. The Central Bank has made it clear today that this will hurt those same people. Take responsibility for it, stop it, scrap it, and don't put institutional investors first, and don't again screw those renters who are already paying high rents with even higher rents.
Well, don't talk to me about the privileged classes when the largest property owners and investors in this House is the Sinn Féin party. Let's remember, your own party is the biggest property owner in the Dáil. Your party's Director of Finance, Des Mackin, boasted to the Irish Times a few years ago that Sinn Féin had easily 40 to 50 properties across the island. He said you tried to tidy it up a few years ago. Oh, they don't like the truth. He went on to say in Belfast alone you have 7. Nationally, I'd say we've at least 40 to 50 properties. The biggest property owners in Dáil Éireann, the biggest property investors, are Sinn Féin. So don't give me this, we're on the side of the working people. You're just a load of bull that people people see right through. You're the wealthiest party in this House, and there's no two ways about it. And at least have the decency to stand by your policy. You are in favour of reference rents. We're in favour of rent pressure zones. It is a balanced package. We're taking measures. To expand rent pressure zones. We're taking measures to make them permanent, but we're also making sure we can deliver more supply, because you know what renters need? Places to rent.
Can I just, before I go to the Social Democrats, I want to acknowledge the group from New Zealand in our distinguished visitors gallery. I know you were welcomed formally yesterday. We're so impressed that they came back again today. And you might, mark a sheet for us in relation to how they performed yesterday against the Very welcome. Then Deputy Jennifer Whitmore.
Thank you, Last Ceann Comhairle. Tánaiste, GP services around the country are at breaking point. They are oversubscribed and they are understaffed. And it now can often take 2 or 3 weeks before people get in to see their doctors. I've actually spoken to a 90-year-old woman recently, and she has to wait 3 weeks when she needs an appointment. She has a history of dizziness and falls. Oftentimes she ends up in A&E, who then send her back to her GP, so we can see the problems there. And indeed, I've also dealt with a child in our constituency, Tánaiste, who needed chemotherapy, but the GP list in her new home area was 2 years long. So she could not get to a GP to get a referral to get her chemotherapy. So this is the ticking time bomb, Tánaiste, and it is about to go off. GP services are the foundation of our health service. If they crumble, everything else will collapse. And the government is sleepwalking us into a disaster because you're not treating this with the level of urgency it demands. A new report this week said that we need at least 940 GPs over the next 15 years to meet that demand. So where is the government's plan to deliver them? I understand and acknowledge that some new training posts have been created, but really that's just scratching the surface of what we actually need. Instead, what we need is a sense of urgency, but there has been nothing but foot dragging. The latest example of this is the Strategic Review of General Practice. This review started in 2023 and was supposed to be completed that year. Now, more than 2 years later, there is still no sign of it. How long more will we be waiting for action? We don't need more reviews, Tánaiste. We know what the issues are. It is blindingly obvious we need more GPs. We know what the barriers are for GPs. So why is the government not actually getting the actions done to address this shortfall? A critical reform that must be rolled out is the introduction of salary GPs, and that's where the HSE will directly employ them. Because when a GP goes into medicine, they go into medicine because they have a passion for making people well and making people better. They don't want to necessarily go in to be business people, to be accountants, to be employers. And really what they want is a better work-life balance, and having a salaried position provided by the HSE is the answer to that. So it would also address all the GP deserts that we're seeing across the country, particularly in rural areas, Tánaiste, where we are unable to get GPs to set up their own practices. Salaried GPs are something that most of the opposition agree with. The introduction is also a commitment in the programme for government. So what exactly is holding this up? Tánaiste, successive governments have talked about the reform of GP services for decades, but the GP contract has largely remained the same for 40 years. So at what point will you stop talking about it and start doing it? My questions are, when will you start taking the GP crisis seriously, and when will we see the introduction of salaried GPs? Thank you, Tánaiste.
I want to thank Deputy Whitmore for bringing up this issue, and she's right. It is a real challenge in lots of communities, including the ones that we're proud to represent in Dáil Éireann. And I'm grateful for the capacity review report that I think she's referencing in terms of the ESRI and the detailed work that they've done, which will assist in workforce planning, showing the growth in GP capacity that will be necessary in light of both the growing population and the ageing population that we have and indeed will have in Ireland as well. In fairness, the Deputy did acknowledge some measures that have been taken. I'd contend numerous measures have been taken to increase the number of GPs practising in the state. We've seen the annual intake to the GP training scheme increased by around 80% between 2019 and 2024, with 350 new entrant training places made available from 2024, and 346 new entrants commenced training last year. So that's encouraging that almost all of the new entrant training places, even though it's significantly increased, is up, and that's an increase in the class, the intake, if you like, from 286 the previous year. So 286 went into training in 23, 346 in 24. We're seeing recruitment of GPs from abroad that commenced in 2023 under a joint HSE ICGP International Medical Graduate Rural GP programme, and currently there are 118 of those GPs in practice, and a further 18 have now completed the 2-year course. Funding has now been provided to bring up to 250 on that scheme, so to get it up from 118 to 250. We have increased investment in general practice to try and address some of the cost issues that many GPs would talk to us about, and the GP budget, or the budget for general practice, has gone up to €211 million under the 2019 GP agreement, with a further €130 million under the 2023 piece as well. There are around 10 commitments in the programme for government in relation to supporting general practice, including structured chronic disease management programme expansion, the full national coverage for GP on call. I do think one of the positive developments we've seen in our own constituency is the rollout of the out-of-hours GP service in Loughlinstown, for example, a service that didn't exist 5 or 6 years ago, providing additional supports for GP practices in rural areas and areas of increased need, because the lack of access isn't equal across the country. On the salary GPs, and I don't have a specific note in it other than to say you're right, I think the salary GPs is a very good idea. I have visited, in fact, in Deputy Gannon's constituency, one salary GP practice. The name escapes me right now, but you know the doctor, and it was a very good model. But we do need to actually see this become more of the norm. There is funding provided to the HSE for the rollout of salaried GPs, because it's as you say, there's many doctors who want to actually deliver medicine that don't actually want to have the challenge of running a small or medium business, as it often is. So I think we can learn a lot from that model, and I'll ask the Minister for Health specifically to outline to you her plans to roll it out, but it is something I'm very much in favour of, the government's very much in favour of, and I do think it provides another option to further increase capacity.
Thank you, Taoiseach. The name of that programme was GP Care for All, and unfortunately last year they had to come to the Dáil to campaign to be kept open. So clearly your government isn't even that small proportion of GP services that do follow that model, the model that we want, the model we all agree under Sláinte Care. They have to fight to stay open because your government has not been supporting them sufficiently. And I'm going to give you some stats to respond to your own statistics there, Taoiseach. 6 in 10 GPs across the country cannot take on any new patients. They have closed their books. So clearly the measures you have brought in are only scratching the surface, and they are not resulting in the changes that we need to see in the numbers of GPs. Of those 350 new entrant positions you talk about, 30% of them will go to Canada, Australia, UK and indeed New Zealand. They will emigrate, bring their skills with them. So we will train them here and they will move overseas. So they're the facts, Taoiseach. Our GPs are crying out for support. Our patients are crying out for medical help and assistance. So please take your head out of the sand and deal with this crisis before it becomes insurmountable. Thank you.
I can assure you my head is firmly up in the air, because there's a lot of work going on in this area, but as you know and as I know from talking to GPs, not just in our own county but across the country, that it's not just the number of GPs. When you talk to GPs, it's also the supports that they want in terms of being able to hire more nurses, the triaging of patients, the out-of-hours service. And I must say, when you talk about GPs leaving the country, and the figures that I put on the record of this House, GPs are coming to Ireland. 118 GPs who've chosen to come to Ireland, to make Ireland their home. They're very welcome. We're thankful for them being here. And they're already in practice today treating patients, with a further 18 completing the course currently, and plans to get that to 250. But let me be really clear. I'm very aware, and not in any way disputing, the huge challenges that exist in this area in terms of capacity. People waiting too long for a GP. There is a need to ramp up further the capacity in general practice. The number of doctors, yes, but also the number of support staff. I think your point around salary GPs is a serious and constructive one. I take the point that we were dealing with a new model. We did find a way forward in relation to that, and I would like to see an acceleration of the rollout of salary GPs, and ask the Minister for Health to liaise with you directly on that.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Roderic will go on.
Thank you, Lascian Corla. Good afternoon, Taoiseach. In the last 2 weeks, we've seen the very concept of vaccination being undermined by the incumbent Secretary of Health and Social Services in the United States. And it's times like this that the science-led approach to vaccination we have here in Ireland is so important. The HPV vaccine was first made available to teenage girls here in 2010 and subsequently provided to teenage boys from 2019. I think you might have been Health Minister at the time. And in 2022, the HSE ran a campaign to provide the vaccine to young women and young men who'd missed the vaccination when they were in school. And the campaign was named after Laura Brennan, a young woman who'd campaigned to raise awareness of the HPV vaccine and who died from cervical cancer. The scheme was regarded as a success and it was expanded in 2023. Your programme for government, published in January, pledges to extend the Laura Brennan HPV catch-up vaccination programme to anyone under 25 who missed the original vaccine. And I've been trying to find out when this new programme is going to be rolled out again, and nobody will tell me. I've been on to the Department of Health with PQs. I've had replies back from the HSE. And each time I'm being told about other stuff. I'm being told about how important the HPV vaccine is, and I know that. I'm being told about a new scheme targeting young traveller and Roma people, and that's great. But there does come a stage when you feel that somebody is deliberately not answering the question because they know that the answer isn't going to be popular. The Irish Cancer Society has also raised the status of the catch-up scheme with officials. It was suggested to them that a broad catch-up campaign could undermine the initial take-up of the vaccine by school children, and that there were some international studies to back this point up. So to try and clarify the matter, I raised the future of the Laura Brennan HPV campaign with the Taoiseach on the 21st of May. He said it was a fair question, and he said he'd asked the Department of Health to come back to me, and I haven't heard anything since. So Taoiseach, could you answer 3 questions for me today? Firstly, is the Laura Brennan HPV catch-up programme going ahead, as was committed to only 6 months ago in the programme for government? Secondly, if it is going ahead, when is it going to go ahead? And if it's not going ahead, can we get a clear statement from the Minister for Health about the rationale why it won't be going ahead, why we're abandoning a programme that everyone felt was working effectively to protect young people in Ireland from the scourge of HPV-related cancers?
Taoiseach.
It seems that Taoiseach stole my line, because I was going to say I'd find out. But look, can I thank Deputy O'Gorman for firstly raising a really important issue, and I will answer directly the questions, but just to join with him in talking about the importance of a science-led, evidence-based approach to vaccination. And I'm very proud that largely, but not exclusively, in this House we have taken a cross-party lines that approach, where we follow the evidence, we listen to the doctors, and we have seen lives saved and cancers prevented as a result of that. I personally knew Laura Brennan. Indeed, I wrote to Laura Brennan's parents as recently as last week. Laura Brennan was an incredible young woman who has saved so many countless lives by dedicating her final years to working to promote the vaccine, and her family are very proudly continuing that work. We did, as you say, also expand the vaccine to boys as well, and after a significant effort, and this didn't happen by accident, by the way, an organised, concerted campaign to run down the vaccine and to suppress vaccination rates, misinformation, disinformation, downright mistruths, online campaigns. We did actually manage collectively, thanks to Laura Brennan, by the way, spearheading this, but working with clinicians, working with the HSE, see the uptake rates increase again. And yes, we have given a commitment to extend the catch-up programme. So in direct answer to your questions, is it going ahead? Well, it's in the programme for government. We put it in the programme for government, and it is going ahead. And if there's anybody in some part of the civil service that thinks they know better, can I assure them that we intend to deliver on the programme for government commitment? I passionately believe in this, as I know you do too. Unfortunately, because I obviously, nor should I have, because I didn't know this question was coming up, I haven't got a direct answer to you as to when, but I will undertake to speak with the Minister for Health today on the matter, and I will undertake to come directly back to you on the issue. I'm always open to hearing if there's a particular reason or obstacle that I'm not aware of, but I think this is a really, really important catch-up campaign. There's a reason it's in the programme for government. I think and expect it's something that there'd be cross-party support on, and I'll revert to the Deputy Director on it.
Thank you, Taoiseach. As you say, Ireland has a good take-up of the HPV vaccine, but at a time when vaccine scepticism is being mainstreamed, our take-up rates have been falling. It's estimated, and I accept this is a rough estimation, that around 16,000 eligible Irish kids aren't taking up the vaccine each year, and that's why the catch-up scheme is so important. We know the risks from the HPV virus. They're risks that can materialise years, even decades after the initial infection. Cervical cancer, oropharyngeal cancer, penile cancer, vaginal cancer, life-threatening, life-altering illnesses. So, Taoiseach, I thank you for your response. So, could I ask that you might commit that in a reasonable period of time, maybe in the next 3 weeks, we get a clear statement from the Minister for Health, either telling us, yes, as you suggest, the campaign is going ahead, and give us a timeline for when it will go ahead. But if it's not going ahead, explain the rationale behind why a public health campaign that everyone says is delivering and is protecting young children isn't going ahead.
Yeah, I give that commitment. I think within 3 weeks, let's come back with a definitive plan in relation to that. And while I'm on my feet, can I also suggest that as this relatively new Dáil commences, that every member of this House would publicly commit to supporting the vaccination programme. There's no room for pseudoscience. There's no room for wannabe doctors who aren't doctors. I want to know, is every single elected representative in every single political party committed to supporting the HPV vaccine for young boys and young girls, a vaccine that can help eradicate effectively a form of cancer in this country? What an incredible thing to say. We have within our grasp over a number of years an ability to effectively eradicate a cancer that disproportionately affects young people, most particularly young women, but not just women. And we have an opportunity here through vaccination and other means to effectively eradicate it. So I'd invite all members of the House to use the opportunity of Deputy O'Gorman's question to recommit to vaccination and to push back against the misinformation out there. And I'll commit to coming back within 3 weeks to the Deputy.
Deputy Peadar, Tóibín.
Minister, Taoiseach, today marks another dark day in relation to the government's housing record. The original target for 2025 of 41,000 new builds has been binned. Minister James Brown has cut the official target by 20%, stating that possibly only 34,000 homes will be built this year. Last year, only 30,000 homes were built, again far short of the government's target of 40,000 houses. This government is in reverse in terms of the biggest crisis happening in this country. You promised 300,000 homes will be built in the programme for government. Right now, you're going to meet half of that figure in relation to the figures that are being built at the moment. Now, I have submitted FOIs to every single local authority around this country to understand the scale of the crisis. And the data that I've received through these FOIs fully contradict the information that your government is giving out. So we asked, first of all, the local authorities the number of homeless people that exist throughout the state. Their figures were that there are 16,472 people who are homeless at the moment. Now, when we asked the government what the figure is, the government tells us that it's 15,580 homeless people. Your government is understating the number of homeless people in this state by 892 people currently. Your ability to count the number of homeless people is out by nearly 1,000 people currently. Now, we also sent an FOI out to every local authority in the country to find out how many people are on the housing waiting lists. And these councils told us that there are 75,000 people on the housing waiting lists at the moment. Now, again, the official government figure is 58,824. Here, again, the government is understating the number, undercounting the number by 16,000 people. Your ability to account the number of people who are on housing waiting lists at the moment is out by the population of Cullinane. Now, that's an incredible situation, Taoiseach. We also FOI'd the local authorities as to the number of local authority homes that are empty in this state. Now, in the jaws of the worst housing crisis in the history of the state, there are 3,779 council-owned homes that are empty. Now, having empty homes in the middle of a housing crisis is akin to exporting food in the middle of the famine. It's absolutely wrong. And the fact of the matter is you're paying nearly 600 million euros to house people in RAS and HAP homes, while so many local authority homes are empty. Now, I mentioned the government incompetence earlier in relation to this, but maybe I'm giving the government too much credit. Is it the case that, in the middle of a government freefall in terms of housing, that actually you're misleading the general public in relation to the amount of people who are on housing waiting lists and the amount of people who are homeless? Can we trust a word out of the government's mouth in terms of these figures, Taoiseach?
Well, I hate to burst your gotcha moment, but I'd suggest that you might wish to interrogate your numbers, because I'm not sure whether we should do a show of hands, but I'd imagine there's not a member of Dáil Éireann, perhaps other than yourself, that isn't aware of the fact that there can, of course, be duplications. There can, of course, be people involved with more than one local authority. There can be people in my own constituency that can live between, kind of Greystones, Bray and Dunleary, and they might be in touch with the two local authorities there, go down to the south, and they can be between Wicklow and Wexford, go to the west, and they can be between West Wicklow and Kildare. So I'd say if you want to hand me over all of that data and information, but let's not, this is what people do when they seek to be divisive, to try and dispute official figures. These figures aren't figures calculated by the government in a party political sense. These are figures calculated by the state in a robust, impartial manner. They often deliver very difficult news for government from a political point of view. So if we could at least, I think, have the decency to respect the impartiality and robustness of those who gather statistics in Ireland, because if we start trying to erode belief in statistics, that's part of a bigger agenda, I think. Yes, the government has committed to the delivery of over 3,000 homes. That's clear in the programme for government by the end of 2030. That's what we need to get to, and we're taking big and bold decisions in the here and now to deliver those results over the next number of years. That means delivering measures that, when looked at in isolation, can understandably be critiqued or questioned, but when you look at them in the round, all of the measures that we're taking are to try and get a bit of momentum back into private investment in our housing market to increase supply. Because what happened was, we saw during the lifetime of the last government, the number of houses significantly increased, very significantly increased, from around 20,000 a year to a bit more than 30,000 a year, and then, being honest, plateau at a level that is too low. That is why we're now taking measures to try and increase supply. It's why we've taken the decision around planning permission extension. It's why we've taken the decision around making more developments, particularly in gardens and attics and the like, exempt from planning. It's why we've published and got through this House a new national planning framework to provide more zoned land. It's why we're establishing a housing activation office to break down silos. It's why we're going to invest significant more in the weeks ahead in Uisce Éireann for water, wastewater treatment plants as well. So we have a lot more work to do in relation to that. In relation to the number of social homes, yes, we have more work to do, but also it's true, and again, you must get invited to these same things that I get invited to in my own constituency. We're seeing a very significant increase in the number of social homes come on stream. And we're seeing last year roughly the largest number of social homes allocated since the 1970s. Never were there more social homes given out in my lifetime than there were last year. And we need to keep that going, keep that momentum, and seek to do more. One point I do want to agree with you on is the council-owned homes that lie empty far too long. And I've had a lot of discussions with a lot of people who are saying, hang on, if only I could get into that house. I don't need the divil and all done. I just need it to be safe and just need it to be warm. And that's why government intends to issue a circular to all local authorities to make it clear health and safety should be the only grounds for the delaying of the giving out of a local authority home, not the bells and whistles that they sometimes go on with.
Deputy Tóibín.
First of all, when you talk about increases in the building of houses, and when you talk about increases in the building of social homes, you are talking about increases from a floor of the worst housing collapse in the history of the state. You're talking about a figure of literally zero on those terms of increases. And in terms of getting these figures wrong and duplications, you cannot be on two social housing waiting lists simultaneously. You can't, simply. So let's talk about the figure of housing waiting. We'll get to the homeless one. So you are understating your figures. Your official figures are understated by a population of 16,676. That is extraordinary. Now, either your incompetence in that you're not able to count the amount of figures, number of people who are actually on waiting lists at the moment, or you're trying to hide the fact. Now, the reason why I think that you're misleading the people is because you have previous on this. Right up to the jaws of the last general election, you were determined to give the impression to the people of Ireland that 40,000 homes were going to be built the year. And as soon as that election were finished, the information became very clear that that statement from yourselves, from a number of senior ministers, from the Taoiseach himself, was wrong. And, I do think that it's important that you come clean with people in relation to this. This housing crisis is far too serious for misinformation. People need to know what's happening in this country.
I tell you, there wasn't as much pirouetting and spinning at my daughter's ballet recital as I just saw there. Like, the reality is, this is far too serious to engage in conspiracy theories here. No, it's far too, because you said, you suggest I'm going around counting people here. The reality is we have robust, politically independent, impartial structures in our state. And I know, I want to know, sorry, wave your sheets of paper, but just one second now, just a second. I want to know who in the public service you're calling incompetent. I want to know which agency. It's our public service, ours. We live in a republic. It's our public service. They do a bloody good job. And I want to know who. No, just wait a second now. Wait a second. Mr. Angry, wait. We need to know, I want to know who in our public service or what agency you believe is wrong in relation to our housing figures. Now, I made the point in relation to the duplication regarding how you can report homeless in more than one area. That didn't suit you, so then you switched your argument at the next stage. We have, you're right, Deputy, we're coming from a very low base after a very difficult, deep financial recession in this country. And we're working on trying to make progress, day in, day out, new ideas, big, bold decisions every day to get to the 300,000 homes. You're just simply over there throwing brickbats and engaging in conspiracy theories. I wish you well.
Now move to Understanding Order 38A, Deputy Matthew McGrath.
Good morning. Today I want to speak to Taoiseach about the escalating crisis in policing across South Tipperary. A crisis made worse by the deplorable policy of neglect, under-resourcing and mismanagement by this new government and the previous government. In communities across South Tipperary, from Callican-Show to Clonmel, Halftrinan, indeed Cahir, Cashel, Bannapareen and Tipperary Town, are telling me people that don't feel safe anymore, they don't feel protected. We now have a situation where a single Garda can be covering multiple towns and parishes, particularly at night. There's no backup, there's no visibility and there are no patrols. And many of our smaller rural stations, the doors are rarely if ever open. Meanwhile, drug activity is creeping further into rural communities and towns, and criminals are even getting bolder because they know the situation, they know the numbers and they are of Gardaí. But that really beggars belief. What beggars belief is the government's decision to push ahead with the disastrous new Garda divisional model, which has resulted in Tipperary Garda headquarters being moved to Innis in County Clare. A mad decision. This is centralisation gone daft, and the consequences of the plan are plain to see. Confusion, lack of local knowledge, demoralised frontline members and communities who feel abandoned. And now we learned that of the 120 guards came out last week, one came to Tipperary Town, one came to the South Tipperary, and one left the same day, Garda Michael Custon, a wonderful officer who returned to his native Cork, and I would thank him for his dedicated service for the last 10 years to the people of Cashel. So how many of these actually, as I said, none came. One, and we lost one, so we're standing still. And all of this is happening while Gardaí are being trained in their hundreds in Templemore and are going to the East Coast or to Dublin. And they need gas too. But we can't have them in Dublin at the expense, the absolute expense of the rural areas. And Taoiseach, I'm asking you today, do you accept that South Tipperary is in a grip of a Garda manpower crisis, not just a staffing issue, but a public safety emergency? How do you justify the decision to shift the Garda headquarters from Tullis to Innis, and will it be returned and or the decision reviewed? Can you tell the House exactly how many? I just told you, there's only one extra Garda came, so that's the facts of it. And more urgently, will you commit to an adequate increase in Garda numbers for South Tipperary so that rural people can feel safe in their homes? This is not just about statistics. It's about real people, farmers, shopkeepers, families, young and old, who no longer feel protected in their own homes. And it's about frontline Gardaí who are doing an excellent job, to be fair to them, with no backup, no resources. And indeed, we had two quite seriously injured. John Welch, an excellent guard in my area, savagely assaulted, and he's out, wish him well, and Garda Philip Ryan. We've actually 12 in the Cahir Clonmel district out sick, and that happens, and it's unfortunate, especially if they're injured on duty. A lady Garda injured again recently, violently assaulted, and it's not good enough. But they need to have numbers.
Well, thank Laskin Gordon. I want to thank Deputy McGrath for raising this issue, and I want to join with him in sending best wishes to the local Gardaí that he referenced, who experienced assault and attack, and a member of a Garda Síochána as an attack on our democracy, and should rightly be condemned. And indeed, in this House in recent years, indeed under Minister McEntee's leadership, we significantly increased the penalties, the maximum penalties for those who assault a member of a Garda Síochána or indeed our emergency services more generally. So I want to thank you for highlighting that and join with you in the condemnation of that. As you know, and you'll know I'm going to say this, but I do have to say it, that the Garda Commissioner is himself operationally responsible for the allocation of Garda resources, but of course the Justice Minister and the Government are responsible for making sure that the Gardaí have the resources, have the budget, have the policy that they need to do their job effectively. I'm informed that when allocating and transferring Garda members to and from any division, consideration is given to commitments and undertakings outlined in the annual policing plan, looking at local crime trends, workloads, policing arrangements, local population, geographical area size, and indeed transfer applications that can arise regarding welfare, personnel issues and concerns. I'm told that as of April of this year, there are 658 Gardaí assigned to the Clare Tipperary division, and 371 of these Gardaí are assigned to stations in Tipperary. These Gardaí are supported in Tipperary alongside 62 Garda staff. I'm also informed that as of the end of May, 79 Garda vehicles are assigned to Tipperary also. But the Deputy is right that obviously we do need to significantly increase our Garda numbers, and he's also right that there's a direct correlation, I believe, between people's sense of safety and Garda presence and visibility in a community. I think that's absolutely true. He'll know what I'm going to say, but I am going to say it because I believe it's true. I think the closure of Templemore twice or three times really during first the economic crash, which the Fine Gael Labour government then reopened, and then during the COVID pandemic, did obviously have a significant impact in terms of the pipeline of new Gardaí. But we're back at a situation now where there are currently 14,223 Garda members, and the number of Garda staff has continued to steadily increase over recent years and has reached a record high of 3,501 at the end of 2024. It's just dipped ever so slightly to 3,493 as of April this year. In relation to the issue of the transfer from Thurles to Ennis, I'll pass your concerns on to the Minister for Justice and ask that he pass them on and engage with the Garda Commissioner in relation to that. We want to see a very significant increase in the number of Gardaí over the next number of years. We have the budget, we have Templemore up and running, we have specific commitments in the programme for government in terms of looking also at a second college and the options that that might bring. And of course that will see more Gardaí across the country, including in County Tipperary.
Thanks for your reply, Taoiseach, but it's just simply not acceptable that we're standing still. And as I said, officers, and I've put this to the Commissioner before, it's putting officers, male and female, in danger, going out in a patrol car on their own to all kinds of incidents. We saw what happened to John Walsh when he had to go out on his own, and please God he'll recover. A terrible situation to have people in that, and up and down Boreens in the middle of the night on their own. Some days there's no guard available in a car or care station or castle. Tourist towns and indeed all the villages in the hinterland. It's just not acceptable, and it's not fair to the Garda members that are there who are doing their best. As I said, the lack of cover in Catholic and Shore is just laughable. It's not laughable, it's so serious. 3 Garda in a town who used to have 18. And used to have 4 sergeants, I think they have 1 sergeant now, and a Clonmel station trying to cover it. And when we have situations and peaceful protests, which we had in Dundrum, I was there myself, when the iPads were being moved in, and we saw what's after happening there. We had the siege of Dundrum. I mean, 200 Gardaí arrived, from the riot squad to the dog squad to the equine unit, God knows what, and the cost of it. And at the same time, there was a house after being burgled in Cullinane, about 15 miles away, and no guard to be gotten. That's the normal case. So we have overkill when it suits you, but it's not acceptable and it's not safe to have Gardaí on their own doing this kind of an area.
So I definitely don't mean this in relation to the people of Dundrum. Far from it. I've met some of them when I've been in Clonmel, but I mean we have obviously seen huge pressures and challenges put on the Gardaí in terms of dealing with extremist elements in certain places. And you can visit them. They visited my own constituency as well. And I want to thank the Gardaí, often in the face of huge abuse, people sticking phones in their faces and all this sort of stuff, and having to show considerable restraint trying to keep the peace. So I thank An Garda Síochána for the work that they do. But I'm taking your broader point, Deputy McGrath, on this occasion, agreeing with you that we do need to obviously do more in terms of increasing Garda presence. And I want to assure you that the programme for government, but not just the programme for government, the pipeline that we're now seeing going through Templemore, I believe will see us on a more positive trajectory as a result of the foundations we put in place over the last number of years. And I also want to assure you that the safety of our members when they're out and about patrolling is of paramount importance to the government, to the Minister and the Garda Commissioner.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Now move to questions on policy or legislation. Deputy Cullinane.
I've lost count, Taoiseach, the number of times I've raised the need for funding for Waterford Airport in this House. In fact, I've raised it several times with you. I would say almost a dozen at this point. I've raised it certainly several times with the Taoiseach as well and with the Minister. And despite all of the personal statements of support that I've received, and I've no doubt I'll get it again from you, it still hasn't happened. A commitment was given in 2019, and here we are 6 years later, still no funding. I have to tell you, Taoiseach, very directly that there is a real frustration right across the South East because 3 local authorities are funding this: Wexford, Kilkenny and Waterford. And here we are, despite all of the promises, all of the information which has been sought, all of the clarifications which have been given, that funding has not been given. I can point out to you as well that, and I don't obviously have a difficulty with funding going to other airports, but over the last number of years, Kerry Airport, Donegal Airport, Knock Airport, Cork Airport, Dublin Airport received very significant capital funding, no funding for Waterford, because we don't have the runway extension. So can you tell me, once and for all, when is that funding going to be given, and when can we have a fighting chance in the South East to have air connectivity with Britain and the rest of Europe?
Well, I thank Deputy Cullinane for raising this issue again, and I do acknowledge that. I acknowledge you raise it frequently, and I would make the point that when we've worked together cross-party in this House on issues relating to the South East and Waterford, including the university, in recent years, we've managed to make progress together. I think this is a similar issue where genuinely, I think across this House there's support for this. The programme for government commits to working with all stakeholders to quickly progress the Waterford Airport project to lengthen and widen the runway, building on the previous commitment decision of 2019. That I believe is the wording in the programme for government. In line with that commitment, I've spoken to the Minister for Transport, Minister O'Brien, and I know he's intending and engaging with local representatives, including yourself, on the next steps. But I want to be clear, I am fully committed to advancing this project in line with the programme for government commitment.
Thank you. Deputy Alan Kelly.
2005, Section 41. The Commission must inform the Minister for Justice of any major issues. On June the 1st, Evan Fitzgerald tragically and very publicly took his own life following getting bail after an undercover Garda operation and being charged. I'm asking, why didn't the Garda Commissioner inform and brief the Minister for Justice of the details of this case and the fact that it was undercover and the guns were supplied by Garda Síochána? And more importantly, is it appropriate, is it right that I, as a member of the opposition, had to actually ring the Minister for Justice in relation to this and inform him of that? Is it correct that I had to go and tell him to go to the Garda Commissioner to ask him about the full details in relation to this case? And would we have ever known about the full details in relation to this case, considering what was said in court on March the 4th last year? Would we have ever known the full details of this if I hadn't to ring the Minister for Justice on June 3rd in relation to this? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Deputy Kelly. Firstly, can I express my sympathy with the young man, his family, Evan Fitzgerald's family. As you say, he's a county man of mine, and I know it's been a great shock in the local community in County Wicklow as well, and I want to extend my sympathy to his family as well. I understand this is a complex case. I'm obviously not privy, nor should I be, to when the Garda Commissioner does and doesn't use that provision in the Act. That's a matter between himself and the Minister, but I do understand that the Minister for Justice has sought further information from the Garda Commissioner on the case. I also note the comments of the Taoiseach last week, I believe, in relation to this issue and a need for a review, and I would support the Taoiseach in his comments in relation to that.
Very good. Deputy Hearn.
The Central Bank housing figures out today show with terrifying clarity the housing disaster that your policies have created. Not only did you mislead the public in the election that 40,000 homes would be built last year, but you won't reach anywhere near 40,000 homes this year or next year, and you're also pulling the plug on social housing projects due to commence on site in the coming weeks. These show that the biggest blockage to solving the housing crisis is this government's policies. You are delusional in thinking that allowing rents rise even higher will solve this crisis. You are clearly disconnected from the reality of the generational anxiety, the despair and the social division that your policies are causing. It's a shame that you're making renters, students and workers pay for your policy failures. Why won't you implement our Homes for Ireland state savings proposal that could leverage the 160 billion held in Irish accounts, that could build thousands of affordable homes, the type of supply that our young people need and want? And why won't you take a COVID-like emergency response to this housing crisis, which is now a complete and utter social catastrophe?
Aaron, so firstly, we are treating this as an emergency. It is a housing emergency, and that's why we're taking big decisions each and every week to try and increase housing supply. We've gotten housing supply from on the floor to around 30,000-ish homes each year. We need to significantly increase that to deliver 300,000 more homes by the end of 2030. We're following the evidence base of the Housing Agency in decisions that we made in recent weeks. We've published the report of the Housing Agency, which is the body which is meant to assist with accelerating housing supply. We followed their recommendations. We've extended rental protections. We're bringing forward legislation in relation to no-fault eviction, but we're also trying to take a balanced approach. Yes, funding is always important, but I believe actually the constraints here aren't funding. I think funding will be forthcoming and more through the NDP. I believe it's around planning, water, infrastructure. I think these are the key areas we need to focus on in the time ahead.
Deputy Charles Ward.
2 weeks ago, your government approved legislation to amend the defective concrete scheme to allow for retrospective payments, to extend the time frames and also include new provisions for vulnerable families. I voiced my opposition to the fixing of a cut-off date of the 29th of March 2024 for the increased cap scheme and updated grant rate, as I believe it extremely unfair and will leave a number of families behind. I would hope this can be taken into consideration when you're drafting the bill. The bill is well overdue. Impacted homeowners are desperately waiting for its implementation. I cannot stress the urgency of this, Taoiseach. I'm getting calls every day, distressed families wondering when the legislation will come in so they can pay their builders and move forward in life. So my question, Taoiseach, when will the legislation be published? Will it be published before the summer recess? And will you commit to ensuring that it is passed on as soon as possible?
Well, thanks very much, Deputy Ward, and thank you for the constructive way in which you've been engaging on this issue on behalf of your constituents in Donegal. I'm pleased with some of the progress that we've been able to make together after Minister Brown has been very intensively working with your constituents and with the advocacy groups in Donegal. I'll ask the Minister to reflect on your point regarding the cut-off date. I'll also ask him to come back to you in relation to the publication of the bill and the timeline, but certainly government is eager to get this done as quickly as possible. We're very conscious of the severe stress and frustration people are living under.
Deputy Michael Collins.
Taoiseach, my constituents are deeply concerned about the proposed closure of Parrot House mental health care facility in Skibbereen, County Cork. This 24-hour staffed residential care facility has been home to many long-term residents, providing them with essential programmes like horticulture, music, poetry and arts, as well as access to the local library, church and shopping in Skibbereen. The HSE plans to move the residents to St Stephen's Hospital in Glenmire, 100 kilometres away, disrupting their lives and community ties. This decision has had a devastating impact on residents and their families, with no consultation involved. Having seen what has happened over the last few weeks in nursing homes, we feel this is another abuse of the elderly, the most vulnerable in our society. Can you intervene here, Taoiseach? And when I'm talking about intervention, I know absolutely these people want to stay in Parrot House, but at least I tried to put the hand out to Parrot House to get some explanation as to what's going on, and they refuse to give us any information. But they have consulted with the families 5 or 6 weeks ago to say something is going to happen, but they haven't told them where their loved ones are going to go. Or are they going for 1 month? Is it 6 months? Is it 12 months or for life? It's a scandalous situation people find themselves in. I'd appreciate if you'd intervene in this matter.
No, look, thanks, Deputy Collins, for raising this issue. And I must say, and I'm not in any way doubting the accuracy of what you say or your bona fides on it, but if true, it's quite extraordinary, that lack of communication. And I must say, again, without being across all the details, the idea of people moving 100 kilometres is an extraordinary distance to move somebody at any stage of their life, least of all is evolved at the latter stages as well. So, look, I know the Department of Health have engaged with the HSE on this matter. They've requested an urgent update on the issue as well, including information on the resident engagement and family engagement strategy that might be in place to ensure transparency, but also to ensure that service users and their families remain confident of all current and future service arrangements. HSE is continuing to review on a constant basis the operational suitability of all mental health facilities in order to meet the needs of people with mental health difficulties, including Parrot House. But I certainly will directly